we have been talking a lot about the president's grim sort of in an interview in a town hall, a virtual town hall that he gave over the weekend. He threw out a grim statistic or a grim prediction in the upcoming months as this country and other countries continue to battle the deadly coronavirus pandemic. So let's get straight to Paula Reid, who's following the latest from the White House. Paula, the president in that virtual town hall revised the prediction for the number of people that we can expect to see die over this pandemic. What prompted the president to revise that death toll, and what are health officials at the White House saying about it?
Well, he's revised this estimate several times. Just 2 weeks ago, he said the number could be as low as 50,000 people. Last week, it was up to 70,000 Americans could die from coronavirus. But last night, as you noted, he said 75, 80, even 100,000 people could die. But even that estimate, Vlad, is still much lower than the one from several of his top health officials. For example, Dr. Deborah Birx said yesterday that consistently the projection has always been between 100 and 240,000 Americans. And she said, according to her notes here, she said that's with full mitigation and everyone really leaning in on social distancing. Now, it's unclear why the president continues to share a different message. Another example of contradictory messages coming out of their White House. There does not appear to be any strategy to the president constantly moving this goalpost.
The president also said that he expects a vaccine will be available by the end of the year. And this really contradicts, even the most optimistic predictions from other members of the healthcare community. Do we know where he's getting this from?
Well, the vaccine is so key. That's what many White House officials have promised. It is really the answer to getting back to normal. And last night, the president tried to put the deadline for, or the goal for, a vaccine at the end of 2020, so right after the election. He also said specifically that Johnson & Johnson, for example, is close. But in fact, Johnson & Johnson has been pretty clear. They're saying the soonest they could actually have a batch of vaccines is not until 2021, until next year. Now, there are some companies that are entering human trials, but as you know, there's many different phases when you're trying to develop a vaccine. And so far, no one else is coming out and saying, yes, we'll be through those trials and ready to go at the end of this year. And we have to remember with vaccines, too, there is no guarantee. Vaccines have been elusive for a lot of other ailments, including HIV, Ebola. It's not clear that we absolutely will get a vaccine. That's why there have to be many trials. And once again, here it appears the president is offering a very optimistic estimate here without any evidence or support for this deadline that he provided.
Paula, the president also tweeted about Congress, essentially questioning whether or not they are essential. And I'll just read for our viewers the tweet that the president launched in the last couple of hours. By Congress not wanting the special 5-minute testing apparatus, they are saying that they are not essential. In any event, we have great testing capacity and have performed 6.5 million tests, which is more than every country in the world combined. Sort of a lot to to digest there. But what's the president talking about with Congress not wanting the special 5-minute testing apparatus? Maybe our viewers are not familiar with what he's referencing there.
So as Congress returned, they were offered access to some rapid result testing. Now, that was a bipartisan refusal to accept this from both sides of the aisle. They got together and they said, you know what, we really don't need these tests. We believe the country is still trying to ramp up and make tests available to all Americans. So they declined the need for this test. The president clearly not pleased with this, but suggesting that Congress is not necessary. Anyone who is even remotely familiar with the different sections of the Constitution know not only is Congress necessary, they're arguably one of the most powerful branches of government. They're certainly not trying to say that they're not necessary by declining these tests. Instead, they're saying they think it could be better used for folks out in their states, in their districts.
So meantime, over the past few weeks, we've watched the president point the finger at China, blaming China for this pandemic. The Department of Homeland Security says that it has evidence that Chinese leaders played down the severity of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Secretary of State says that China should be held accountable. What are we hearing from the president? Because, he also seems to have a good relationship with Xi Jinping, while simultaneously criticizing the country of China for the spread of the pandemic. What are we hearing?
That's been right, Anne Marie. It's been interesting to watch the president's sort of evolution of thinking about China's handling. Initially, he praised China for its handling of the virus back in January. Then when there were suggestions coming out of China that the U.S. could have been responsible, his rhetoric shifted pretty quickly. But then he continued to praise President Xi. A lot of folks attributed this to trade, because when the president would often praise him, he'd be pressed on that. He would bring up the good trade relationship. So there were questions about whether the president was holding back, not really being as forceful as he could have been on China and their lack of transparency, trying to establish, keep that trade relationship. But in terms of the origins of this virus, on Friday, the intelligence community came out with a statement confirming that they believe that, in fact, this virus did originate in China. But they also concurred with a widespread scientific consensus that this was not man-made or genetically modified. And they said they would also continue to investigate whether this outbreak began with humans interacting with animals, or if there was an accident at a laboratory in Wuhan. Now, the president and the Secretary of State, though, have both suggested that they have seen evidence that this did originate in this lab in Wuhan, though neither one has been willing to elaborate. And it's interesting, a lot of these questions about China, about the origins, they come just as the Trump administration is under increased scrutiny for its handling of the pandemic. And over the weekend, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, he confirmed that they believe the Chinese government tried to really conceal the spread of this outbreak while stockpiling medical supplies. A big question for the administration today is why they would have expected China, a communist country, to be transparent and trustworthy in their information about this kind of outbreak.
Paula, as you know, Vice President Pence is expected to hold a teleconference with some of the nation's governors today. What are you hearing we can expect from that?
So these occur weekly, sometimes a little more often. Vice President Mike Pence, since he is a former governor, he's been the one who's been really dealing with a lot of the state leaders on a weekly basis. He and the president kind of have this good cop, bad cop thing going in terms of trying to help the states. Largely, the White House over the past several weeks has been trying to let the states take the lead on their response, being responsible for getting their own testing systems underway, getting their own supplies. And during these calls, this is an opportunity for these governors to either thank the White House for any help that they've given them, but also push back, to complain, talk about things that they need, things that are frustrating them. There are many times audio from these calls leaks. We get a lot of information about these conversations. It's been interesting to track sort of the relationship between the White House and the governors. That's really been a big part of the vice president's role, is to communicate with the governors. But it seems that the president really only wants to hear the feedback that has to do with praising him and thanking him for the help that he has been able to get these states on the ground. But we'll have our calls out to sources to try to figure out exactly what happens on today's call and what the state governors are looking for this week from the White House and the federal government.
I know you will. Paula Reid for us at the White House. As always, Paula, we thank you.